Hi everybody, Carolyn Whitaker, and I just want to show you a really quick tip on this image. If you'll remember, the last time we saw this image, we actually took a chair out and added some color to the background to get it ready for painting. And so at this point, I need to go in and I want to balance her face just a little bit. She has a pretty heavy shadow on the right side, or the left side of her face, the right side as we look at it. And the highlight on the left side is pretty bright, or the right side, her right side, the left side as we look at it. So what I want to do is I'm going to create another layer. And the other thing that I want to show you is that if you look down here at the bottom part of her face, it is, I'm going to reduce this brush size real quick. It is just slightly a different color than the rest of her face. Almost looks like a bruise. I don't think it was, but it's just off color. So what I want to do is I want to even this color up. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to choose a small brush. I want to make sure that it's a soft brush, which it is. Then I want to go into the brush settings and make sure, because usually the default is set on pin pressure, but I want the brush dynamics to be off. I don't want to have to worry about pin pressure. I want it to be off. The pin pressure has to do with your Wacom tablet and how much pressure you're applying. And some people really like that. I personally don't. I like to be able to paint and know that my paint's going on there evenly wherever I apply it. So I just want to change the color of this. So I'm going to drop my opacity down to maybe, looks like I got it set for 25%. Let's try that and see what we can do. And in fact, let me put it back to 100 and show you what would happen if we leave it at 100. I want to choose this color here. I don't mind it being a shadow, but I don't want it to be quite so black or purple or whatever color that is. So I'm going to use my control key and use my alt key and sample this color right here. And then I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to set it to color. Okay, my opacity is at 100. I don't want it that when I really do it, but I want to show you what happens if you do set it at 100. Okay, so if I set it at 100, that's what we get. And that, of course, that looks terrible, so we don't want it to be that. So let's set our opacity back to maybe, I don't know, 22%. Let's try that and see what we have. Once again, I'm going to sample with the Alt key. I'm going to choose a color that I like, and then I'm just going to go in here. Now, this is not going to lighten this area, but what it's going to do is it's actually going to change the color of the area. So it's not perfect, but I think it looks better. It looks closer to the color up here than it does to the color that it was. So let me put just a little bit right in here. And I want to put just a little bit right in there. Now this especially comes handy. For instance, if you were outside and this little girl was sitting on grass and the reflection of the grass was in her face green, you can actually use this technique to remove some of the yellow and green from a face to get rid of it. And so that's a really great way to do it. I want to show you one other thing, and I think we touched on this in the last time I did a tutorial, but I want to show you again what you can do as far as lightening and darkening the face. Once again, I do have some software that will lighten and darken that I use, but I want to show you how you can do it if you don't have the software. So I'm going to do a Control M that brings up the curves panel. I'm going to use the Control key to set a marker. As you can see, that's where the marker is. That's where the darks lie. And if I were to pull it up, that would lighten it. But I don't like that, and so I'm not going to do it that way. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the up and down keys on my computer, and I'm just going to change it in just small little increments. So I'm going to use the up key, and what that is going to do is actually lighten the area. The only problem with that is it lightens the whole image. And so as I use that control key and I get it where I think I want it, I'm going to say okay. Then I'm going to create a layer mask, and I'm actually going to paint off the light areas that I don't like. This time I'm going to bring my opacity up to 100%. I'm going to, as you can see, this is white, this is white. That won't work. They have to be opposite. So I'm going to change that to black. There's my black. And of course I'm using Photoshop. I'm going to make my brush larger this time so that I can cover a large area at once. And I'm going to show you how you can just paint off all that lightening you just did, except in the areas that you want it. Okay, so I'm going to take it off for a bow. I'm going to take the background. And you know what? I think I'm going to leave it on the flower because I like having a little bit more detail on that flower. I'm going to leave it on some of her hair because I want to lighten it up just a little bit. Because like I said before, we are doing a painting. That I want to take it off the highlight of her arm. I don't like how light her arm got, and I certainly don't like how light her face got. This actually brings her face back to the original lightness that it was. And I'm going to take it off her dress because I want some detail in that dress when I get ready to paint it. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it here on this area of her arm because it is a shadow, and that did lighten up when we changed it. So what I can do now is I can turn off all these little eyeballs on the layers, and I can see exactly what I have. So I have lightened up. I'm going to make sure I don't have it on her dress. I have lightened up this side of her face. I have lightened up. I'm going to take some of that off the background up there. I have lightened up a little bit of the flowers, and I've lightened up a little bit of her hair. And I'm going to turn this back to white and paint some of it back in because I want to make sure that I have plenty of her face taken care of, and that area of her face that I wanted to be lighter is there. So let's look and make sure that what I just did was the right thing, okay? So if I take it off, you can see how much darker her hair goes, the flowers go, and her face goes. Can you see that? Okay, so I have that done. Now I actually want to darken the highlights just a little bit. So I'm going to drop this layer by hitting Control-E. I'm going to duplicate the layer once again. And then I'm going to do a Control-M, which gives me my curves again. And I'm going to sample with the Alt key those highlights. Now the highlights aren't quite as, I'm going to use the Control key to sample the highlights. Now the highlights, as you can see, fall pretty much where they need to be. So I'm just going to drop them a tiny bit, maybe just 2 or 3 little clicks on this down button. That drops the highlights. I'm going to say OK. Now what I did there is once I drop the highlights, I also drop those shadows. So once again, I'm going to create a layer mask. I am going to use the black, remember the black, and I'm going to paint it off the areas where I don't want it to be darker. So that would be her face, underneath her chin, this area of her arm, this area of her arm. Ooh, I don't know if I like that very much. I'm going to take that back. Actually, what I'm going to do is when I get ready to actually paint this image, I'm probably going to take care of that shadow. So I don't like the way that looks very, very good. But for now, we're okay. I'm going to take it off here. I'm going to take it off her hair because I did lighten that up a while ago. And I'm going to take some of it off those flowers because I want to be able to paint some details in those flowers. So if I turn off these little eyeballs, you can see the areas that I actually brought back up to make sure that they weren't darkened. Do her hair here as well. And I can just do the areas that I want to do. I don't have to do anything more than I want to do. So if I turn them back on, you can see that we now have a little bit darker highlights. And then you can also see that the background darkened a little bit, and that doesn't really bother me too much. But if I wanted to, I might even drop my opacity to 50% and bring some of that background back. So if I wanted to do that, I could. Let me bring my brush up just a little larger. And I can bring some of that background back if I wanted to. So as you can see, when I turn my little eyeballs off over here, I'm sure that's not what they're technically called, I have actually brought just a little bit of that background back to where it was. Not a ton, but just a little bit. And if I don't bring it up in certain areas, it's not going to matter too much because like I said before, we're going to paint that. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial today. And I hope that you'll consider joining us. If you want to come to my painter class, just let me know, and I'll have a link below that you can certainly sign up if you'd like. And if you don't, I'll still have tutorials here and there to show you different things that we can do. Appreciate your listening, and I hope you have a blessed and a great day. Goodbye.